The Gospel of John, session 10, John 16:33 to 21:25. Let's complete John's trial. Let's take a look at the scene 2. This is John's 18:33 to 38. Pilate now returns to the praetorium to question Jesus, and this scene is centered on the fact that Pilate and Jesus have very different understandings of what a king is. In a literal sense, they are from different worlds. While no charge has been made against Jesus, Pilate's question in 1833 reflects the fact that he has either heard something or an implicit charge has been made. If Jesus has presented himself as a king, then he's guilty of sedition, which is a capital crime. Jesus then questions Pilate. Is this a charge that Pilate's making, or has it been suggested to him? Jesus does not deny being a king, but he also suggests that Pilate's understanding of kingship and his are very, very different. In 1835, Pilate puts some distance between himself and the Jews. He has really no interest in settling a Jewish dispute and actually probably holds the Jews in contempt. In 1836 to 37, Jesus doesn't answer Pilate's questions. Instead, he explains the nature of his own kingship. Two statements capture its essence. My kingdom is not of this world, and my kingdom is not from this world. Jesus is not saying that his kingdom is totally spiritual and has no relationship to the world whatsoever. He's simply saying that his kingship and kingdom are of a different order than Pilate's. The Jews and Pilate and Jesus have very different understandings of kingship. Jesus' kingdom is not based on political power or military power. It comes from beyond the world. The unspoken question here is, what is the purpose of a king? For Pilate, kings subject people to their rule. And for Jesus, being a king means witnessing to the truth and bearing witness to that truth. As Pilate's question makes clear, he finds this incomprehensible. Like the Jews, Pilate has closed himself off from the truth. John 18:38b to 40. This is the third scene of the trial. Pilate now goes back into the praetorium to speak to the Jews. He reports that he has found Jesus to be innocent. And in 1839, Pilate seems to mock the Jewish leaders, an action which actually coheres with what we know about Pilate. Surely, he asks, they would like for the king of the Jews to be released in a Passover amnesty. The Jews demand that Barabbas be released. Significantly, his name means son of the Father. 1840 reports that he's a robber. This was actually the term that was used to designate those who were in rebellion against Roman rule. The Jews may be getting back at Pilate, attempting to force him to release someone who really is guilty of rebellion, while Jesus clearly is not. John 19:1 through 3. This is the fourth scene of the trial. Pilate now attempts to get Jesus released. He has Jesus flogged, a punishment which will allow him to release Jesus despite the demands of the Jews. The scene is ironic because Jesus is now mocked by being crowned and clothed in a purple robe. But this only calls attention to the fact that Jesus has arrived at the moment of his coronation, which is the cross. For John, Jesus' crucifixion is his enthronement and glorification. By humiliating Jesus, the Roman soldiers actually are calling to attention to what is really taking place. Jesus really is a king. John 19:4 through 7. This is the fifth scene of the trial. The irony continues. Pilate now presents the Jews with their king. Jesus is presented as beaten and bloody with Pilate's acclamation, "Behold the man." In other words, Pilate's sending a sort of message here. First, he's saying something like, doesn't this beaten man look like a threat to you? And second of all, he's saying, now, take a look at this poor, half-dead guy. He's an appropriate king for a conquered people like you. In response to this, the Jews now explicitly demand that Jesus be executed. This, of course, has already been suggested in 1831, but now it's demanded. Pilate tells the Jews for the third time that he has found Jesus to be innocent, and he mocks them by telling them to take Jesus and crucify him themselves, something that he knows they can't do. The Jews now make a charge against Jesus. By making himself the Son of God, by claiming divine honors, Jesus has committed blasphemy, and this is a capital crime according to Leviticus 24:16. Pilate's mockery has only moved the Jews to deeper in their intransigence. John 19:8-12. This is scene 6 of the trial. In a sense, this scene is the climax of the whole trial. Pilate now takes Jesus back to the praetorium and questions him again. And the key question is posed in 19:9. It's the question that's dominated this gospel. Who are you? Where are you from? Jesus is from the Father, and knowing this is the key to understanding who he is. When Jesus refuses to answer this question because he knows that Pilate won't receive the answer, Pilate emphasizes his authority. What Jesus says in 19:10, I think, is key to understanding what's now unfolding. You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above. On the surface, Jesus is on trial, but in truth, it's the world that's on trial. While Pilate seeks to release Jesus, the Jews are determined to have him crucified. They now make a threat. If Pilate releases Jesus, they will make sure that the emperor finds out that he let a dangerous revolutionary go free. In short, they've threatened to sabotage Pilate's career. John 19:13-16. This is the 7th scene of the trial. John tells us that Jesus is sentenced to death at 12 o'clock on the day of preparation, the time at which the Passover lambs would have begun to be slaughtered in the temple. Look ahead to 19:14. Pilate engages in some final mockery by presenting Jesus to the Jews and saying, "Behold your king, ha ha ha." His message is clear. This is the kind of king that you people deserve. And he asks, "Oh, what, do you want me to crucify your king?" But Pilate is forced to choose between either condemning an innocent man or damaging his career. And making this choice really presents him with no struggle. He sends an innocent man to his death rather than damage his career. In 1915, the Jews make a startling confession. They rejected the Son of God as the King of Israel and state a very different allegiance. We have no king but Caesar. They've opted for the rule of Caesar over the rule of God. John 19:16b-22. This is now the first scene of the crucifixion. Crucifixions were carried out in very public places so that those crucified could serve as a warning to those who contemplated resistance against Rome. Jesus is taken to Golgotha, which at one time was a rock quarry. Today, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre stands on the spot where Jesus' crucifixion took place. There's an irony with regard to the inscription that Pilate has affixed to Jesus' cross. The titulus proclaimed the crime for which a person was being crucified. And Jesus' crime is that he is the King of the Jews. Where Pilate intends this to be an insult, ironically, he's actually proclaiming the truth. Jesus really is the King of the Jews. The chief priests protest this proclamation. They perceive the insult, and they also want to make it clear that Jesus is not their king. For them, it's essential that Jesus be known as a false Messiah who was justly crucified. John 19:23-24, Crucifixion Part 2. John certainly understands Jesus' death to be the fulfillment of Scripture. The larger framework for interpreting Jesus' death is Isaiah 53:13-53:12. In 1924, John cites Psalm 22:17. Psalm 22 is about the suffering of a righteous person, and so sketches out an outline of Jesus' death. The citation from Psalm 22 indicates that Jesus is to be seen as a righteous figure who's undergoing unjust suffering. John 19:25-27, Crucifixion, Part 3. John's account of the crucifixion differs from the other three Gospels in that some of Jesus' followers are present at the foot of the cross. Also unique to John is the report that Jesus' mother and the beloved disciple are among this group. While brief, this scene has great significance. Jesus' last act is to entrust his mother to the care of the beloved disciple. In both 2:4 and 19:26, Jesus addresses Mary simply as woman, and this suggests that she's playing a symbolic role. In 2:4, Mary seems to represent the church in her trusting response to Jesus, do whatever he tells you. Now in 19:26, she appears as the mother of the church. Jesus seems to be saying that now the beloved disciple is her son, and that Mary is the beloved disciple's and the church's mother. In Isaiah 60:1-4, Zion is portrayed as a mother, the mother of Israel, Mother Zion. Now she's portrayed as the mother of the church. John 19:28-30, Crucifixion, Part 4. Jesus is aware that his mission is now finished. Here, finished means brought to completion. His thirst is not simply physical. In 18:11, Jesus spoke of drinking the cup that the Father had given him. What Jesus thirsts for is the fulfillment of the Father's will. The Roman soldiers interpret what Jesus says here as physical thirst, and so they offer Jesus some common wine. Jesus connects this with Psalm 69:22. John's already cited Psalm 69 in connection with Jesus' passion in 15:25. We're invited to see that the suffering of the psalmist as a prefiguration of Jesus' own suffering. The mention of hyssop in 19:29 is significant too, because in Exodus 12:22, hyssop is used to apply the blood of the Passover lamb to the doorposts of the houses of the Israelites. This is another link which connects Jesus' death with Passover. Significantly, Jesus' final words indicate triumph. It is finished. Jesus has accomplished the work of the Father, and his work cannot be undone or reversed. John 19:31-37, Crucifixion, Part 5. Since it's the day of preparation and Passover begins at sundown, it's necessary for the bodies of the three crucified men to be removed, according to Deuteronomy 21:21-23. Corpses were considered unclean, and you couldn't have corpses hanging out on Passover. So to speed the deaths of the three men, Pilate sends soldiers to break their legs and so hasten the process of dying. The soldiers find Jesus already dead, and so don't break his legs. And John understands this to be a fulfillment of Exodus 12:10, which commands that the bones of the Passover lamb are not to be broken. For John, Jesus is the Passover lamb. He is the Passover sacrifice, for in him the great and final Exodus takes place. To make sure that Jesus is dead, one of the soldiers pierces Jesus' side with a lance, and blood and water flow out. John provides a hint of what this means in 1937 when he cites Zechariah 12:10. This text is part of a series of oracles in which God promises to purify his people. In Zechariah 13:1, we find a fountain being opened which will purify Jerusalem from sin. John wants us to see that this fountain proceeds from the side of Jesus. The water and the blood which flow from Jesus' side also have a sacramental significance. The water is the purifying water of baptism, and the blood is a reference to the Eucharist. Behind this may be Ezekiel 47, in which a purifying stream flows out of the temple. Of course, Jesus has already made it clear that he is the true temple in 2:13-22. Jesus is the true temple, the true Passover, the true purification. The sacraments of baptism and Eucharist provide us with access to that purification which flows from his death. John 19:38-42. This is John's account of Jesus' burial. Jesus' burial is accompanied by two Jews, Joseph of Arimathea, who is a disciple, and Nicodemus, whom we met back in chapter 2. These two men see to it that Jesus receives a royal burial. The mention of myrrh and aloes recalls Psalm 45:9, which describes David's royal robes as scented with myrrh and aloes. Significantly, Jesus' tomb is located in a garden, which takes us back to the beginning of the biblical narrative in Genesis 2-3, and suggests that Jesus' death has restored creation. John 20:1-10. It's now the morning of the first day of the week, the day that we now know as Sunday. It's essential to note that Mary Magdalene comes to Jesus' tomb with the intention of preparing a corpse for burial. When she discovers that the tomb is empty, she does not conclude that Jesus has been raised from the dead, but that his body's been stolen. When Peter and John are informed of this, they go to the tomb. And while the beloved disciple arrives first, he waits for Peter, probably out of deference to Peter's status. The fact that the burial cloths are still in the tomb indicates that the body has not been stolen. We should remember that when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, Lazarus comes out of the tomb still wrapped in his burial cloths. Jesus is not bound by burial linen, for he's not bound by death. What is the nature of the beloved disciples' faith in 20 verse 8? It's probably best to think of this as, at this point, as belonging to a kind of a partial faith, for the Spirit's not yet come. 29 makes it clear the disciples do not yet have a resurrection faith, since they do not understand the Scriptures, and for this reason, they return to their homes. John 20:11-18. After Peter and the beloved disciple have left, Mary returns to the tomb. And she looks inside it, and she sees two angels, one sitting at where Jesus' head was, and the other located where Jesus' feet were. And this certainly suggests the mercy seat from the book of Exodus, which had an angel at each end. See Exodus 37:7-9. This, of course, was also central to the Day of Atonement. Jesus is the true mercy seat. Note Romans 3:25. Angels are signs of the presence of God, and their presence here indicates that God has done something. The central dynamic of this narrative is the gradual turning of Mary away from the tomb and toward Jesus. Only as she turns fully away from the tomb is she in a position to come to resurrection faith. Mary needs to learn not to cling to the Jesus that she's known. As long as she is turned toward the tomb, as long as she simply wants for her former relationship to Jesus to be restored, she cannot come to resurrection faith. The ascension must follow, and only at this will the truth about Jesus be available. In an important sense, Mary and all the disciples must let go so they can receive the ascended and glorified Christ. Note that Mary's given an important role. She is an apostle to the apostles in chapter 20, verses 17-18. John 20:19-25. Significantly, the first Easter finds the disciples not filled with joy and hope, but locked in a house together and filled with fear. Jesus enters into this house and brings peace to them. Here, peace is the situation in which things are properly ordered. This sort of peace can only come from God, and this is precisely the gift the disciples need. Jesus shows the disciples the marks of crucifixion, and this makes it clear that the crucified Jesus and the glorified Jesus are the same person. It's only at this point that they come to resurrection faith. Note that resurrection faith is organically connected to mission. Just as the Father has sent the Son into the world on a mission, so the glorified Christ now sends the disciples into the world on a mission. Faith is not a private and personal matter. It sends a person into the world on a mission, for this mission is essentially public. For John, resurrection and Pentecost coincide in John 20:22. The disciples received the Spirit not for their own personal edification, but for the sake of their vocation. Without the Spirit, they would have no vocation and would not have the power to carry it out. And this seems to be the point of 2023. The disciples are not simply preachers. They've been given a share in Jesus' ministry of cleansing the world. They are consecrated by the Spirit to act on behalf of Christ. John 20:26-31. We have to be careful here because of ingrained prejudices about doubting Thomas. With this narrative, we're moving away from a focus on the disciples to a focus on future disciples. Note that Jesus knows what is troubling Thomas and that he offers to address this trouble. Jesus is not simply raised back into this normal bodily life, nor is being raised into a completely spiritual form of existence. As he returns to the Father, he presents his glorified humanity to the disciples. And this glorified humanity involves a resurrection body, which still bears the mark of crucifixion. Note Revelation 5:6. We also want to remember that even those Jews who anticipated a resurrection, and not all did, only thought of it coming at the end of history. We don't want to forget how overwhelming this experience must have been. John doesn't tell us whether Thomas actually touched Jesus' wounds or not. He only tells us about Thomas's response to Jesus' appearance, "My Lord and my God." This is the strongest confession regarding Jesus in this gospel. 2029 could be read as either a statement or a question, because Greek has no question marks. If this verse is not a question, Jesus is not rebuking Thomas, but simply making the statement that future believers will not have his experience. Future believers will not have the experience that Thomas has just had. But this won't make their faith any less genuine. In 20:30-31, we find an address to this issue. While Thomas could encounter the glorified humanity of Jesus, future generations will encounter Jesus through the witness of the gospel and through the Spirit. John 21:1-14. This narrative is about the mission of the disciples and needs to be read symbolically. A group of disciples led by Peter is fishing in Galilee at night, the normal time for fishing. As we've seen, night tends to symbolize spiritual darkness or spiritual blindness. And we see the disciples here on a mission without Jesus and thus failing. They catch no fish. Jesus appears at daybreak because, spiritually speaking, his appearance is a daybreak. The situation rapidly changes from failure to dramatic success. And the reason for the change is the presence of the risen Christ. The huge number of fish looks forward to the fruit of the apostolic mission. The breakfast of fish and bread recalls the multiplication of the loaves and fish back in 611, and certainly has a Eucharistic significance. As they embark on their mission in the world, the disciples will experience communion with the risen Christ through the Eucharist, and will come to know him as a personal and energizing presence. John 21:15-19. At this point, there's a lingering question, which we've already kind of looked at, and that's of Peter's vocation. Is Peter a disciple of Jesus? After 1827, the question arises in a really significant way. The question isn't answered by Peter, but by Jesus. It's not Peter who restores himself to Jesus, but Jesus who restores Jesus, but Jesus who restores Peter to himself. Jesus' threefold denial is essentially erased in the threefold question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" In the place of Peter's denials, Jesus offers a vocation, feed my sheep. Peter's vocation to feed the sheep will be the way his life is shaped from now on. John 21, 20 through 25. Peter's question in 2021 is our question too. Lord, what about this man that is the beloved disciple? What about him? What about the mysterious beloved disciple? He has followed a different path than Peter. We saw him at the foot of the cross and he immediately recognized the risen Jesus when he stood on the shore. Peter's been given the task of feeding Jesus' sheep. What about the beloved disciple? Jesus provides the answer. Peter, that's none of your concern. Your concern is to follow me. Peter has a vocation that he's received by the mercy of Jesus. What happens to the beloved disciple is not his business. He must entrust himself to Jesus. The beloved disciple gives us part of an answer to the question. His role, his vocation, is to write the gospel that we're now reading, which tells about, among other things, the miracle of Peter's restoration. Can sinners be involved in the mission of Jesus? Peter's vocation is proof that they can.